I'm thrilled to have you. I mean, I think, as we talk further, Ted, anybody that's going to be viewing and listening to this realizes that you're one of the most influential marketers out there, both from social advocacy, employee advocacy. I love your focus on relationship to relationship. I think it's so spot on. I know you created it a few years ago, but it so resonates and continues to evolve and grow. So thanks for joining us. I think it's going to be a really kind of insightful session here, and I look forward to many more moving forward. So I thought maybe first and foremost, we can kind of start the conversation around, that whole connection economy, your viewpoints on that, the relevancy to brands, give the viewers your thoughts on that whole, approach that's happening right now.
Mark, really excited to be here with you to talk about how things are changing in the world, in the way people connect, and most importantly, with respect to what we do, with the way brands connect with people and people connect with brands. And I just want to say in the beginning that a lot of what I'm talking about is about all brands. It's not just about B2C, not just about working with consumers. It's about B2B also, because I think there are a lot of correlations now, and I think a lot of that has changed with the way the world has changed. In other words, I think B2B marketing used to be here and B2C here. And I think they've really come together a lot in the methods because of the way people are communicating and putting all their thoughts, their worries, their concerns, their comments out there. It's given us an ability as all types of brands to, first of all, really listen. And I want to start there. I want to start with listening. There's no excuse not to be listening to what's happening, but I'll tell you, I think the vast majority of brands aren't. I think that there are a select few that are doing a great job of truly listening. And when I say listening, I'm not talking about listening software. To me, that's just the first step. That gives you an idea into keywords, into some things people are saying, into hearing about things that are trending, but it's not truly listening. Truly listening is stepping in on conversations.
The listening side is something that really resonates both in our client base, but things we're seeing across. I think the ability to analyze data, a conversation is a stream of data. You can kind of gather, you can see the consistencies, you can see a whole bunch of different behaviors and traits coming out of that. Some brands are a little bit hesitant to go full steam on the engagement side. Fundamentally, they should be listening and monitoring to everything that's happening in relation to their brand and their advocates.
When I speak, there's a slide I put up on the screen at some point through my presentation, almost every time, and it's a fly. And I always ask people, do you know what this is? And some people get it and nod their heads. It's the proverbial fly on the wall. And, we all know that expression. I wish I could be a fly on the wall in that meeting. And what's killing me is that every consumer in this country is inviting us into their living room as a fly on that wall, and the vast majority of brands are not going there. I will invariably ask a room of a few thousand attendees, all brand marketers, how many people in this room, either themselves or the people on their teams, go to the pages of their fans, followers, and consumers to see what they're posting, what they're talking about. And I'll tell you that maybe a handful of hands go up, maybe. And my advice to them is that every single person in this room and everybody on their teams should be going to the pages of people that follow them instead of worrying so much about bringing them to their pages. Because it's on the people's pages where the really valuable conversation is happening. So for me, the start of all of this is our ability to interact and engage and hear people.
The empowered customer kind of has so much influence on a brand's both behavior, response, reputation, more than ever before. So give me your take on the challenges or the concerns or the issues marketers are faced with that level of transparency. Like, they're still struggling with it.
People talk about influence, and unfortunately, and this is something I've been trying to steer brands not away from, but open up their view, is that people talk about influencers and it's come to define people with great influence instead of we all influence somebody. I've spoken to brands or individual brands or even social media experts, and I'll say to them, why aren't you talking to these people that have only a few followers? And they're like, well, they only have a few followers. I'm like, well, first of all, you never know who they're following. I want to be talking to these people. And you never know who's following them. And by the way, same thing I have a lot of followers that their bio is in Chinese. But if you really dig in and take the time and go see who's following them, you'll find that there's a lot of followers that speak English, that know what you're saying. And we're not paying for those followers, so why wouldn't you want them engaged with you? Because you never know who knows somebody. And I intentionally, just about every day, go into the feed of somebody with a small following and share something that they shared about themselves, about a brand, about something they're concerned about. Because I do have a lot of followers. Now, all of a sudden, that person with 100 followers just reached my 7-figure following. To me, there is where the real opportunity stands. And then the ability to communicate and have that communication scale. So I hear a lot of people say to me, well, you know what, those conversations, how many people can we talk to? Why should we bother talking when we have 1 million fans or followers? And how many can we talk to in a day? And my take to them is that the vast majority of people that follow you have no interest in talking to you, but they're watching the conversations. And just because they're not tagging it or liking it or participating in it doesn't mean they're not being influenced by it. I've had brands say to me, well, we don't want to open up that channel because we're afraid, oh my God, everybody's going to communicate. I'm like, no, they're not. They don't care about you in that way. Most don't want to communicate, but what they want is to know they can when they need to. So when they see the brand respond to Mark, who's got a concern, and that concern can be something mild, there's something little, and they recognize that concern, everybody feels that connection. And to me, that's where the real opportunity is in social. And that's why I talk about converse and convert. And I like to say that conversation is the best content. And I don't really mean, sure, there's other great content and there's better content, but that's great content for a brand because that means they're getting people talking in one way or another. And that when someone talks about a brand, it spreads. They talk somewhere else, take it offline. And, that to me is the real opportunity. It's the opportunity most brands are afraid of. And there's a little, there's a misconception. People think that the vast majority of brands are afraid because they're afraid of what might get said. They're really afraid because it's incredibly hard work and because they're just not ready to jump into it. That's the real fear. I've had a few clients call me in the middle of the night with something that erupted on their feed. And my answer to them is leave it be. Let the conversation play out. You have a lot of followers. You watch, your advocates will jump in and defend you. But, if they ask you a direct question, Mark, why did you guys do this? Well, that requires an answer. But if they're just saying Mark sucks, I say when people say Ted sucks, I don't respond. Sometimes I even like it. Brands are getting more comfortable with that respect. But what they're still afraid of is how do we train everybody? How do we manage that? How do we listen to it all? And then how, and again, their fear that I think is misfounded is they think too many people are going to jump in and talk to them. Some brands are getting rid of regular customer service totally and doing it via social. Because what they've learned is that, number one, the efficiencies of it. Number two is, JetBlue has a saying that when one person's complaining, there's a good bet there's another 150 people with the same complaint. And if they answer it publicly, they stop 149 other people, or whatever percentage of it would, from calling in and complaining about it and asking a question. And now it's been answered. And I think a lot of brands are missing that opportunity. Brands have to learn how to communicate differently and realize that if we're open, upfront, and honest, if we take advice, if we tell people right up front. I think Delta did a great job of it. They had this ridiculous collapse. And they came right out and said, listen, we had a failure with our systems. And they came out and said, yes, we had backup, and the backup failed. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to fix it. But what they could have done was said, oh, we're on it right now. We're going to have it fixed. We're going to get it done. But they went with past experience they've had over the last few years. And Delta is not necessarily my favorite brand on social, but they're doing a great job. Their curve is like this. Yeah. They took a big lead from JetBlue. They've been watching them. And they've realized that you see videos on their planes now from their CEO talking about the things they're doing. And what I loved is they actually walked the walk these last few days. And they were very upfront and honest. And I just want to say that I think Delta did a remarkable job. And I think this is a real key to a lot of brands. They made a statement up top. They've been building that culture to bring it down into the workforce. And all of a sudden they had this crisis, and it was a crisis. you know, and have you heard horrible things on social? I have not. Imagine on a corporate and brand and enterprise scale when there are those kinds of failures, and there are going to be those kind of failures.
Let's stay on this topic of kind of employee advocacy. Some people would argue, well, that has to rest under the head of HR and all that. And others would probably argue, well, that's going to be a critical function of the marketer. And give me your thought, because it is.
I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
I think you know I'm on the advisory board for the last 3 years of Dynamic Signal, one of the top, I believe, the top employee advocacy platform. But I see it from a few different perspectives. I see it from my perspective, where I think if you empower your employees, they'll power your brand. And there's so many valuable ways to do it. I see it from the brand perspective, where they're struggling with it. And then I see it from the Dynamic Signal perspective, where they're trying to get into these brands and they're hitting exactly what you're talking about. Their biggest challenge is not getting a brand at this point to agree that it's something valuable. It's deciding who's going to be in charge of it instead of making it across all the different platforms. And there's usually a discussion between HR, comms, and marketing, and they all want to own it. Personally, I think HR is the last place in the world it should live. I just don't think they understand. I mean, they're just not a part of the comms and the marketing function. And then just to quickly segue just for a second, I think there's a real problem with all these things being apart. I believe there should be a chief customer officer, whether that should be a CMO who gets a little bit of different training, or it needs to be a new position where everybody reports into. And I personally think it should be the CMO, where comms, customer service, all these things come into one person about how do we touch the consumer. What's happening with employee advocacy is there is this push-pull and this struggle within the organization. And it has to do a lot with things that you and I have talked about omni-channel and I talk about one of the biggest problems is companies talk about omni-channel going out, but they forget about omni-channel on the inside. If you don't have omni-channel on the inside, if you don't get rid of those silos, you know, like if I'm in digital marketing, I'm in mobile marketing, even marketing has its silos. And I understand people have to have jobs, but there has to be more of a broad focus. And I think we have to get rid of some of those walls. So with employee advocacy, the problem becomes, first of all, that all these brands are concerned about is what kind of message we can have going out about our brand from our employees, instead of recognizing it's about the employees more than it's about the brand. And to me, where employee advocacy has to go to truly empowering our employees. And that means encouraging them to build their social following and their influence, giving them content that helps them do that. So it's not just content about pan communications. I mean, if all your employees, and then let's talk about it from a brand perspective, just being selfish. If you're a brand and you give your employee, and your employees are not that social, but you're saying, hey, we're going to help you be social because we're going to give you great content, and you'll be helping a brand. And then if all Mark shares on his feed is stuff about Pan Communication just got this award, Pan just landed this thing, what's going to happen? His followers are going to stop paying attention. Companies have gotten that from the digital marketing area. They've gotten that we can't pound them every minute with offers. We need to give them content of value, but then they don't do the same for their employees. Look, different people have different things. So again, it depends on the size of your organization. Obviously, smaller businesses, more people handle more things. But if you're talking about an enterprise or Fortune 500 level, there should be people from HR that are thinking, hey, our employees care about vacations. They care about education. They care about things to do with their young kids. How many of our employees are in their 30s with children? Well, we should be giving them content about activities to do on the weekends. We should show them we care about what they're doing. And then you should have comms be thinking about earned media and the things that they're doing and what can we share and how can we get more value around that. And then marketing should think about their marketing message. And then also comms, we think about, well, we won this award and we won this account and all the other things that you can be sharing. Now, I will tell you that, like everywhere else, a lot of companies don't do a great job of this. So I'm sure you've heard me say that a network gives you reach, but a community gives you power. And if you treat your employees strictly as a network, you are wasting all that power that can become about if you build them into a community.
Do you think B2C has learned from the B2B experience on employee advocacy? I mean, I think B2B's learned a lot from B2C on how to connect, how to engage, how to converse. B2B brands are definitely adapting to a lot of the great things that the B2C brands are starting to do more. Do you think it's opposite a little bit on the B2B side with employee?
when I first joined Dynamic Signal, I expected the low-hanging fruit to be the B2C companies. Because hell, you have thousands and thousands of employees. They all have friends. You're selling, mugs. Everybody needs a mug. I mean, think about what you can do with that. We came out with this great mug. You drop it, it bounces right back up into your hands. I mean, hey, there we go. We got a product idea. What I found was it's the B2B companies that are embracing it much quicker. Some of the biggest clients from Dynamic Signal are Accenture, IBM, Deloitte. The reason for that, I think, and here's where the learning comes in, is they're very accustomed to creating very directed content for their audience. Marketing has always been about the shiny toy, the ad, the buy this, it's great, it bounces off the walls. Whereas B2B is much more of a consultative sale, so it requires a lot more information. So I think that first of all, they're much better prepared for this whole content marketing world. I also like to say what gives them an advantage in social is their universe is limited. Other than a Salesforce where, the numbers are huge, but even a Salesforce, they have a list of every single potential client. I guarantee you go in there down to the smallest company, they have lists and spreadsheets and everything telling you everybody you can contact and who you can call. Whereas consumer marketing, that's obviously not possible. Number one, because we don't have all that information. Number two, because the universe is astronomical. They have much more of ability to direct their communications, to listen to what they need to hear. Yeah. Than B2C. So I think B2B has embraced employee advocacy a lot more. I also think B2B companies have many more, I would say as a percentage, I don't want to say higher level, but they have more manager, director, VP level employees than a consumer goods company, where when you look at the number of employees and it says tens of thousands, a vast universe of those people work in factories, work in stores, are at a very different, whether it's education level, training level, all different types of things. So I think that the B2C companies can learn a lot, because the problem is, I don't think they recognize that. They still think there's this big wall between them instead of recognizing how they've really come together more. I think there's a lot of learning going on there. I just think, like everything else, we have to open our mind.
As you talk about the drop of silos in the marketing department, I mean, it is something that, we've been seeing and you've been seeing for the last several years, the issue of there should not be any type of silo in a marketing organization. Everybody should be one underneath the brand advocacy. But when you look at from an employee advocacy, do you think the individuals inside of the marketing department or the CMO who starts to align that skill set with it has the ability to be the true change agent moving forward?
I think C-suite people are rarely the change agents, unless it's a CEO who's brought in with a mandate to change. And even then, I think they come in with a playbook most often. I'll tell you how many interviews I went on when I was changing gigs, where they'd ask me, what would I do in my first 60 days to change the company? And I'd said, absolutely nothing. How can I change a company that I don't know anything about? Like, if you asked me what would I do in the first 60 days, I would listen, and I would ask questions, and I would observe. And most, especially recruiters, they can't hear that. They want to plan. I think change happens usually from a lower level. To me, in most organizations, change happens at the director VP level. The guy that says, this is not for me, I want to make a change. If I can't work here, I'll work somewhere else. The problem with CMOs is, and it's not their fault, there's limited CMO roles. It's the mid-level employees that need to rise up. I like to say we have to start a revolution in our companies. And the first revolution we have to start is we have to tell them that we want to be creative again. I don't think I've ever been in a Fortune 500 brainstorming session where more than two people spoke. The vast majority sit there, and either they're afraid to speak because they'll say something stupid and be laughed at, or they'll say something that their boss is unhappy with what they said. And there's two guys guiding the conversation. They're all given the information before they get there, so they come in with preconceived notions. And, I like to say that we have to start thinking like kids again, so that we can get in touch with that creative side. How many people actually take the time these days, especially in companies, to sit back and just think? How many people are empowered to do that?
I wanted to touch upon one key thing that I know is keeping marketers up at night, all about generational marketing, the ability to kind of communicate to whatever specific, targeted audiences we're looking at, how boomers are learning from millennials, how millennials are starting to learn from boomers a little bit. I mean, all that kind of stuff. But I think at the end of the day, it presents a massive nightmare for marketers. especially the CMO. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think the biggest mistake marketers are making is, first of all, using the word millennials way too much, assigning them with characteristics that to me are mostly not characteristics of millennials, but are of young people. Millennial, I don't know if you remember this, but and remember, millennials are getting older now. Millennials are in their mid-30s. So all of a sudden, a few years ago, the articles were millennials have no interest in insurance. Now the new articles, millennials are buying insurance in droves. Of course, they're having kids and they're moving to the suburbs. Millennials will never leave the city. They're city dwellers. Now, millennials are fleeing the cities, again, because they're growing up. And then they talk about millennials like they're this new species. Millennials communicate all the time. Millennials listen to their friends. Yeah, because they have the tools to do it. It's not that they're different. Millennials care much more about causes than other people. That's a bunch of crap. I like to say that boomers were the original millennials. I mean, think about it. Boomers were the first to march on Washington, change voting rights, stop a war. Why did they? But they stopped. They became yuppies. No, they had to stop because they needed to get a job and pay bills. And you could only march on Washington by getting in your old beat-up Volkswagen or your Volkswagen van and driving to Washington. Now, you can march on Washington 24/7 from wherever you are. So the reason millennials care so much more about causes is because they can. They have the time and the tools to. I just think that number one is, I think we have to realize they're not from another planet, that millennials and Gen Z and younger generations are just growing up with different experiences and different tools. And you have to look at it more holistically that way. And then the other side of it is that you just have to remember that there's so many different groups within these groups. I mean, I rarely hear someone saying we're marketing to boomers. I hear them say we're marketing to women in their 60s in the Southeast. You don't hear that a lot with millennials. And I think we have to just remember that those groups still, are still very diverse.
If you're an exec team and you're a CMO and you're looking to kind of hone in your skills, what are the top 3 or 4 things, 5 things you're looking at right now as a skill set to that marketer?
I think the most important role of a CMO is bringing together a good team. I think the biggest challenge is understanding that you need people below you that get much more than you do. I don't think I know a CMO that is an expert in more than 1 or 2 of these things, because the odds are they came up through the ranks and they ran digital marketing. And if they ran digital and then they shifted to mobile and all of a sudden digital changed. And I think they really need to recruit good teams. And one of the things, first of all, I think the words mobile, social, and digital are going to disappear very quickly because everything is mobile, everything is digital, and everything will be socialized even if you're not socializing it yourself. So, what I think is the biggest challenge of CMOs is communication, is bringing in really good team members that can school them on the things they need to know, that are the ones that actually have the time to be an expert in something. Because how many CMOs can really be an expert in everything they have to do? I mean, I hear all this talk, well, CMOs now have to be data experts. Oh, please. First of all, most of them ignore the data. They look at top line numbers because who has the time? They don't have the time to dig in the numbers the way a data expert does. What they do is they hire a really good data person who, the real challenge is communicating, because you're a data guy. You just go and do what you think you need to do with the data. The real challenge of a CMO, to me, is team building, is communication. The CMOs that I see that are doing the best job are the ones that are really out there, getting to know their consumer, getting out on the street, talking about what they're doing, and communicating with their teams, and then having the ability to let their team members run with things and be a coach and be a leader.
It's interesting because, we've been around for 21 years and I've seen and kind of watched the evolution of marketers. I keep going back to, that first point you talked about, which listening to me is insight to me is behavior to me is kind of more of a path to purpose. Do you think that's ingrained in today's CMO, or do you think they're learning kind of like the new rules of engagement right now with regards to the way the customer has forced them to change the way they market and behave?
I think that, about CMOs is that I don't think that they've gotten this at all. I think there is a very small group of CMOs that are recognizing the fact, and you might have heard this come out of my mouth or John Andrews' mouth because we make videos about this, that stop reading white papers and going to learning sessions and just do it. Jump in and use it. The best CMOs, Cheryl Atkins Green at Mary Kay, Sarah McAloon at CC's Pizza, Paige O'Neill, who was at SDL, they're jumping on social. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but Paige engaged me personally to train her with her, like to work with her on her personal brand when she was at SDL, and we sat down for 2 days where we went through how to use, what to do and how to share some of your personal information and, how to intertwine it. But to me, it's less about building their brand than understanding the tools. How do I have CMOs all the time that say, can we sit down and just walk me through Snapchat? The smarter ones. Are they going to get active on Snapchat? Of course not. But I say to them, you've got to experience it. What CMO would authorize $1 million buy on TV or a Super Bowl buy and not watch the commercial? But they're not doing it with these tools. So I think that a much bigger group of them have to jump in, and I say this all the time so they understand them. Do you know that I still meet VPs of marketing who say to me, I'm sorry, let me change that. VPs of social media who tell me I don't do social media myself. How could you not do it? I'm not saying that you have to worry about being influential or building a following, but how could you not be in there experiencing these tools and the way they change every day? Twitter is completely different than it was 3-4 years ago. Right. Instagram is changing every day. Facebook, my favorite thing is people saying to me, oh, Facebook's, if you're not buying ads, it's worthless. There's no nobody's going on. There's no engagement. I'm like, what are you kidding me? Every time Facebook makes it harder for people, I get more value out of it because I'm willing to do the work. Mm-hmm. Because I jump in, I engage, I go to other people's pages, I look at, like I said, like we talked about earlier, how about just going to the pages of your followers and see what they're posting about? CMOs have to open their mind to experiential marketing for themselves.